Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about what we're doing at ICANN with regard to many efforts to increase the reach of the internet on a global basis. So what I'll be talking about is how we plan to increase the reach of the internet for the next billion people around the world. ICANN turned about 20 years in age less than a week ago. And during the 20-year period, we've seen the stats speak for themselves. There are about 4.5 billion people around the world who are now on the internet regularly. And give or take, there are about 15 billion devices that connect to the internet in one shape or form. And we play a role, along with a variety of other bodies, in making sure that this happens in a coordinated manner. So the role of ICANN, for those that are new to what ICANN does, the role of ICANN is to serve as the provider of a secure, stable, and resilient identifier system, unique identifier system, so that the internet operates the way it currently does. And when you think about that, what is it that makes the internet work actually? The internet works on the basis of IP addresses, domain names, and protocol parameters. These are decided by different parts of the ecosystem that ICANN is a part of. We think of it as the ICANN ecosystem. We have a board of directors that's representative of a multi-stakeholder bottom-up model that decide on which of these should actually become the de facto parameters and schemes, and we then implement them. And my role is to serve as the chief engineer and the chief information officer for ICANN. So with about 50% of the world, over 50% now of the world participating in the internet economy, the question then becomes, how do we attract the remainder? And there are certain innate problems when we think about the remainder. When we think about the next billion people, just as an example, one thing that most people immediately jump to is the presence or lack of infrastructure. So do they have the means to jump onto the internet? But that's just one of many different problems that people have when they jump onto the internet. I'll give you a simple example. If you think of Saudi Arabia, smartphone penetration in Saudi Arabia is north of 100%. It's 160%, as a matter of fact. So that says that on average, everybody has 1.6 phones. Most people in Saudi Arabia learn the language that they speak and also learn how to read and write it. But they don't learn other languages. So when we first started to come forth with the internet as we now know of it, the entire premise there, since it began where it did, which is on the west coast of the United States, the entire premise was to use Latin script. So languages that lent themselves to the Latin script became the first languages available on the internet. And the internet resolvers took the string that was entered as a URL and resolved them from left to right, because that's the direction in which the Latin script gets written. But here we have a case where it's a literate people. They learn how to read the Quran using the Arabic language early on. But it's written right to left, and it's not in Latin script. So how do we bring them on? One option is to teach everybody in Saudi Arabia how to speak, read, and write English. And the other is to teach the internet how to speak Arabic, which is precisely what we've done. We've now taught the internet how to speak Arabic. And when you use an Arabic keyboard, you can enter a URL, and the URL will resolve from right to left, recognizing the fact that the URL is in Arabic. So this is a means through which we are actually providing those that don't have access to the internet new ways to access the magic that happens when they have access to the internet. Now, people need a reason to come online, and there are a variety of reasons that we've seen people want to be online. But fundamentally, people want to be online for two things. They want to communicate with one another, and they want to be informed about what's happening around them. So there was a period of time when we thought that perhaps the apps economy would be the means through which people access the internet if they're coming onto the internet in languages other than English. But the fact of the matter is that's not the case. We are the ones who issue the top-level domain names and track how the usage is occurring on a global basis. And what we're seeing is that that's on a steady path to growth at roughly a rate of 3% year on year. So more and more people are actually coming up with more and more interesting domain names and using that to convey their messaging. The app economy, on the other hand, is relatively flat. It's not growing much. There is a discovery process there that doesn't seem to be lending itself to rapid growth. So what are we doing about it? We're developing more and more internationalized domain names, which means that we're trying to make what I talked about in Arabic the de facto in as many parts of the world as possible where there are large representative populations. India is a classic example where there is a lot of local languages, where people are literate in their local language, but not necessarily English literate, but are being denied the opportunity to participate in the internet economy because they do not speak English. So in the last several years, we have sat what are known as language generation panels. These are experts in linguistics in specific languages who understand how nuances in the written form of languages actually work in language, in region. So we've convened them, and today we have introduced 8 new different languages that are now available for public comment before they become officially available. So we have Devanagari, Gujarati, Gurmukhi, Oriya, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, and Kannada as languages that will be available very shortly once we're past the public commentary period. What that means is when the next round of top-level domain names starts to be available, you can apply for new domain names using local languages and create domain names using that script. And the script will resolve, leading you to a specific website that has content in the same language, which then says that someone, for instance, who's literate in Kannada will be able to use a Kannada URL, and that Kannada URL will resolve and will result in content being returned to them in Kannada. So how big is this? How large is this likely impact? Every study that we've made says that this will be in the neighborhood of an additional $10 billion of impact. Now, one way to look at the impact is with the lenses of dollars and cents. The other is to look at the impact in terms of people who previously were not a part of the internet generation, and how many of those are likely to be impacted. In India alone, that number is estimated to be about 500 million people. While we boast of a population of 1.3 billion people, there are about 500 million people who are very literate, want to stay informed, but just don't speak English. So they will suddenly become part of the internet community. Now, we're not stopping with this. We are continuing to look at other languages and other countries where we will have a similar impact, where the numbers are large and warrant having scripts be introduced to the root zone so that those will also resolve. So through this mechanism, we are very confident that we can attract 1 billion more people onto the internet so that they become part of this growing community. The interesting thing about the internet is recently we had the Boston Consulting Group do a study of how large of an impact has the internet had, reflective of 20 years of having been around. You know, in age terms of technologies, this is relatively young. And we claim 4.5 billion people on the internet regularly. But what's the economic impact? We ask that question of them. Measure it in ways that you know how as experts and tell us what you see. And the answer that they came back is pretty staggering. It's about $5.5 trillion on a global basis. And it's growing at about 12% year on year. And there is no end in sight as far as they can tell. So imagine having 1 billion more people who can participate in this large economy, which already is the 5th largest economy in the world, and contributing to its further growth over the years to come. So there are problems that will also come with this. There are languages, scripts that are similar to each other. English and Cyrillic, for instance, are fairly close to one another. You could create strings that look alarmingly similar and lead to different destinations. So like every technological advance, there is the likelihood that if it's used improperly, it could lead to unintended consequences. So we'll need to be guarded about that and make sure that that does not happen. I said earlier that one of the most common use cases for the internet is pure communication. So what are the big communication houses doing about it? So as we speak here, Microsoft and Gmail are providing support to email in internationalized formats. So it'll be very likely that you will be using multiple different languages in sending and receiving emails, even at the address bar level, which today is a prohibitive kind of an obstacle for people who don't speak the English language. Within India itself, there's a company called Data XGen that's providing email services in all the Indic scripts. There's 22 of them, is that right? 22 of them here. And the National Internet Exchange of India, NIXI, has already launched the extension .bharat, which is the name for India in the Indian languages. .bharat is the way we refer to India, or Bharat is the way we refer to India, supporting 15 different Indian languages. So these are new advances that have become possible on the internet that we couldn't even dream of 3 years ago. It expands the reach that the internet can have. We continue to expect countries like China and Thailand to become active in this area and remain active with their scripts. That'll continue to increase the reach that they can bring because of their large populations. So the next billion is likely to be here in the next 5 years. We project that in the next 5 years, that billion that is disenfranchised today will be on the internet. So for us, it's very exciting times. As ICANN, we've been responsible for making available IP addresses, domain names, which have been the vehicles through which more and more people have been part of the internet. Language is the next logical step for us. This is very exciting, and we're watching eagerly to see how you take the internet forward on the basis of having IPv6 now, which is practically limitless available. Domains, we have the next round of top-level domain names becoming available soon. The community is working toward that as a goal. And new languages. If you combine those 3 capabilities, we see no end in sight. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate the audience very much.